It's absolutely disgusting. The government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens have locked away the mother and baby home files for 30 years. 30 more years of darkness for the survivors of the horrors of the mother and baby homes. Most of the survivors will be dead by the time the files are released. And now the victims won't be able to access their own files freely through the National Archives. They'll have to apply to TUSLA. And even then they could be just denied. And it also means that no one can question the Mother and Baby Home Commission on what's in those files. It's a cover-up and it stinks. I wonder how many of the TDs who voted to seal away those files for 30 years have a parent or grandparent who was in power back in the day when women were being imprisoned in the laundries. So is that it? Are you covering up for daddy or for your granddad? The government even imposed a whip on members of the government parties to make sure that they wouldn't vote with their conscience. The church dominated this country for decades. I mean, the 1937 Constitution was written by Archbishop McQuaid. He dictated whole passages to Eamon de Valera. And the days of church rule aren't gone. They still control our schools and our hospitals. But there's a reason why the church is so powerful. I mean, the British Empire at first oppressed the Catholic priests and banned the bishops. But you see, things changed after the 1798 rebellion, when people like Wolfe Tone and Robert Emmet rose up, taking inspiration from the French Revolution and fighting for equality for all. The British Empire realised that the Catholic Church had opposed the rebellion and realised how useful the church would be to keep the powers that be in power and to keep the people down. A people that is convinced that they're sinful and worthless will never rise up. And so the British Empire established a priest training college in Maynooth. They started to promote the Catholic Church as a pillar of the establishment. After the Irish Revolution, it was the Irish rich who got their hands on the Irish state. Instead of moving towards an equal country, the vision of people like Connolly or Pearse, the heroes of the GPO, the Free State was a counter-revolutionary state. During the revolutionary years, women had joined Cumann na Ban. They'd put guns on their shoulders and fought for freedom. After independence, the Free State government herded women into laundries. They knew that they had to smash the working class. They'd seen the working class take part in the fight against the empire, and they knew they had to put us back in our box. And they did that with the assistance of the church through the most brutal methods imaginable. The fact that paedophile priests raped their way through working class areas is in part explained by the doctrine of sinfulness. This nasty attitude that every child is rotten and sinful. But you combine that with the element of upper class revenge, trying to keep the working class down and make sure we never rose up. It was a potent mix when those two were put together. The Irish state established a prison regime of industrial schools and laundries where women and children were jailed for next to nothing. At any one time there were 8,000 kids in industrial schools. They were made to work as farmhands or made to clean and wash and look after the nuns as a slave labour force. They even sold thousands of kids off to American families. In 1993, the horrors of the mother and baby homes was brought to light. You see, the Sisters of Charity are property developers. They were gambling on the stock market and lost a few quid. And so they sold some land in Donnybrook to a property developer. But when the property developer got workers to start sticking shovels into the soil, what did they find? They found 155 bodies. The Donnybrook site had been the former site of a laundry. This discovery in the early 90s started people asking questions about what exactly happened in the laundries. Survivors started to come forward and tell the horrific stories of what they went through. Women were put into the laundries for being raped. They were victims and then they were victimised. Young girls could be sent to the laundries for being good looking because the local priest thought they might tempt local men. Women were regularly beaten in the laundries. They were made to eat off the floor if they did anything wrong. In 2014, almost 800 bodies of children were found in a septic tank in Tuam. It was the site of a Bon Secours mother and baby home. The children ranged in age from 3 weeks to 3 years old, and many of them had starved to death. And despite having millions in property and millions in land, the religious orders refused to cough up compensation to the victims. One religious order paid 3 million into the compensation fund and then refused to release the funds to the victims. Survivors had to fight tooth and nail for an apology from the state and had to fight tooth and nail to get any money from the church. In the end, the taxpayer had to cough up the compensation, and yet the church is loaded. The Sisters of Charity alone have a property portfolio worth 233 million. These people are speculators and property developers. The Catholic Church in Ireland has 1.5 million properties. From 2001 to 2011, they made 660 million selling off property. And these people say they have no money to build a local community centre, or we've no money to pay survivors of abuse. Hypocrites is what they are. We need to just take it off them. You see, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are so embedded with the church that they won't go near them. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have pretended to be progressive in the last few years, because after the banking crisis they lost a load of votes, so they embraced repeal and marriage equality half-heartedly because they wanted to win back voters, because they understood that the working class is more cop-on than the establishment. Working class areas voted overwhelmingly for marriage equality and overwhelmingly for repeal, because working class people have more sense than the establishment. But the establishment keep the Catholic Church in the back pocket. That's why they still control the schools and the hospitals, because the church is handy to wheel out if we ever rise up, to tell us that we're worthless and sinful and we should get back down on our knees. So shame on Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, although we expect nothing less from you. But shame on the Green Party. You told people you represented progress. You've spit on any voter that expected change from you lot. We need to separate church and state once and for all in this country. And then when we've done that, we need to challenge a state that was built by a counter-revolution, a state that stands in the way of real progress for working class people.